Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 134.
Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast with your host, Jack Mountain Bushcraft School founder and Master Maine Guide, Tim Smith.
I'm your host, Tim Smith. I'm a registered Master Maine Guide and have been a full-time outdoor instructor and guide since founding the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School in 1999. We help people become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more confident in the natural world through our bushcraft and guide training semester programs and multi-week canoe and snowshoe expeditions. You can check out the show notes to all of our podcasts at blog.jackmtn.com. If you're interested in learning more about our college-accredited and GI Bill-approved programs, visit the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School on the web at jackmtn.com. And check out our online network and digital learning academy at bushcraftschool.com. Hello and welcome back to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 134. This is our Christmas 2024 holiday special episode. Nothing will be different than normal. Absolutely nothing. I am joined today over the internet with Oz and Rick are joining me. How's it going today, gentlemen?
Going great.
Going well.
And this is definitely pushing the technological limits of my know-how. Up to this point, for those of you who don't know the background of the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, I've got a little audio recorder. Usually I set it on the table in front of us and we just have a chat over coffee around like a kitchen table or something. So today we've got a service that we're trying out. We're like in 3 different states. It's all very technological. Thankfully, the smart people that make these things make it simple so that people with my technical background can hopefully pull it off and make it seem kind of seamless. But, just that usually we're sitting around the table here. These video and audio streams are being beamed into space and back, and I don't know how any of that works. But thankfully, I don't have to.
There's a little
so
wizard
what we
behind
wanted
the
to get
curtain.
together and talk about today was the recent Maine Guide Medic course that we ran in November, and we wanted to get some of our thoughts down into the podcast universe on this before they were lost to memory, before those memories were lost to time. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this course, the Maine Guide Medic is a 2-week wilderness first responder course that we designed and put together specifically because we saw some gaps with the current common first responder courses, meaning it seemed like there were a few things that they should be covering that they didn't. So for ours, it's a 2-week course. We ran it in 24, and in 25 it'll be in November, again, kind of end of the season. And again, our motivation, the why, was to add in things that we thought people needed to know. And now, we've had a bit of time to sort of think about it. Basically, what did you guys think? How do you think the course went?
Overall, I was super, super impressed with it. The scheduling and the topics, I think, were dead on. And I think that was proven through the group exercise where they literally had to implement pretty much all of the tasks that we had come up with. So everything from, your basic bushcraft skills, from knife work, axe work, starting a fire, processing firewood, creating a shelter for individuals and for the patient. That was all stuff that we covered throughout the week prior to the group exercise, and they literally had to apply all those skills in order to make this thing successful. So I was super, super happy with that group exercise.
Yeah, me as well. How about you, Oz? What did you think?
As a student, I thought it was great, right? Because, you go to most other schools and you kind of, especially when it's anything to do with any kind of first aid or medical, there's a whole lot of classroom time. And you get a whole lot of and then you would do this or then you would do that. And having that kind of final exercise put everything, where you had to actually do it, where you actually had to extract the victim, where you actually had to move logs and stop bleeding and have all those follow throughs, right? Start keeping a log. And I think one of the things I loved about the course was, and what I think would make it hard for anyone else to put it on, especially if they didn't have good instructors, is it's easy for students to take a step back and allow the people who know what they're doing to just take over, right? And so it takes the instructors like what you and Rick were doing, making sure that you're switching out leadership roles, making sure that you're putting people on the spot, because that's where the learning, I think, really starts happening, is in those moments. Because it's easy, say you're a good classroom person, right? And I can sit in a classroom and I can get all the stuff that Rick's throwing at me, no problem, right? Because I'm really good at taking notes. But then when I get out in the field, I just take a back seat because the knowledge really isn't there. I'm not confident about it. So I just take a back seat and I let the guys or the girls who know what they're doing kind of take the lead. And what I loved about this was no one had that opportunity. There was no back seats, and everyone was expected to step up and show that they had proficiency in what we had been taught in that classroom.
Yeah, I think without the sort of practical field-based component, why not just have the whole thing online like this, I do think that's the difference. Like the real being out there, being cold, wet, hungry, and still performing. And that's why you do a course in the field to begin with. And that it's interesting that both of you guys brought that up, because that was one of the big motivators to put this thing together, was that, hey, it's got to be realistic. It's got to be hard. So yeah, it's super interesting.
It also wasn't just like, okay, let's get them wrapped up. Let's get a shelter, half-assed thrown up, and then get a fire started. Okay, you guys did that. All right, we're done for the day. No, right? We had to. We collected wood for that full day. We were building shelters. We're tarping things up. We're taking care of the patient. We're creating a patient log, right? So it wasn't like we didn't even have an hour of follow through, right? It was the full night. It was that full day. And I think that's where, when the fatigue sets in and like the coolness of it, like, oh, well, shit, it's actually snowing outside. I have really no gear. And now it matters what kind of wood I cut, right? It matters if I was lazy during the day, right? So I that's what I really loved about the course is not only the knowledge was super tested, but the follow through wasn't short, right? It was
all of the details mattered, right? And I think that's an important thing. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on briefly was just about how we had this course set up. We envisioned it as a mix between the medical components, the medical curriculum, and then the necessary woodsmanship curriculum in order to pull off the medical things in a remote situation. And I think that was the big motivator, that a lot of the modern medical courses sort of assume that people could tie good knots, assume that people could build a shelter. And we went into this assuming nothing. So the way it kind of broke down was we spent about a half to 2/3 of the day on medical topics, like specifically focusing on them. And then we wrapped up the day in the woods outside, doing hands-on skill stuff. And I think it seemed to be, from my perspective anyway, it seemed to be a great fit, that if you could kind of lecture at people for 15 hours a day, but no one's going to retain anything. And I think that the amount of time that we spent, we spent a lot of time on medical topics, but then balancing that with switching gears and being in the woods seemed to be just a super good fit. I really like that aspect of it. And I think from feedback that we got from the students, I thought that they really liked that as well. So when you started to get kind of tired and fatigued of reading about soft tissue injuries, then we're going to go out and swing axes. And, when we're swinging an axe and you realize that one mishit with the axe, and then all of a sudden, hey, that tourniquet in your pocket, that's like super important and useful. And having that there, ready to go with the knowledge of how to use it, I think it kind of drove everything home.
Yeah, definitely. I thought the doing all the medical stuff in the morning and then transitioning to the bushcraft survival stuff was super helpful. When I teach just the regular wilderness first responder and I'm doing 8 or 9 hours of just medical stuff, you can start to see the life getting sucked out of people. So I think mixing it up like that was really key. And think next year we're just going to mix in a little bit more medical stuff while we're doing the bushcraft stuff to get some more hands on. That was one of the things that I learned from this previous one was just to mix up some of the medical stuff and incorporate a little bit more scenario play throughout the days.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. We don't know what we don't know. And the first time that we want to run a program, I think, is always the hardest. So the second time is often like, 50% better than the first one, because you can go through as a pathologist and look at everything on the outline and be like, okay, this worked, this didn't work. How can we switch this to make it work better? So it's always exciting watching those things develop from just a sort of offhand comment about an idea. Oh, we ought to do something where it's more real and more authentic to, to the point where, okay, we just did that. We spent 2 weeks doing it. And now with that experience under our belt, I think we can really fine tune it and make it even better. And I think that's exciting. So a couple of things that I learned on this course that I thought are worth mentioning. And I've done a lot of, I'm not a medical instructor. That's Rick's job. But I think I did my first EMT course in 1996, and then smattering of them here and there throughout to try to maintain some certifications as the years gone on. But, even after that many years and a variety of courses, there are still certain things that I learned and things that became a lot clearer to me. And one of the things that I got a lot out of on this course was the Stop the Bleed certification that was included as part of the course. I feel like my skills at managing like soft tissue injuries, excessive bleeding, I think I had some idea about it before, but now I have all the details. And I think that was a huge thing. Also, 1996, when I did my initial EMT course, that was before we were at war in the Middle East for 15, 20 years. So a lot of the sort of medical protocols were different. And that's a great reason to go back and take successive medical courses, because as that field expands, as people learn new things, the protocols change. So I made the joke during the course that, when I did my medical training, it was so long ago that the answer for everything was to throw leeches on people and say a prayer and maybe some holy water. But, on a joking matter, but in a serious note, like tourniquets, if you said that word back in the 90s, you were sort of told never to say that again. It was like screaming fire in a crowded theater. Nobody wanted to hear that. Now, it's par for the course, right? That's a big part of it, especially of stopping the bleed and anyway, my experience with the Stop the Bleed, the tourniquets, seemed to become really fine-tuned, and I was super happy to have that. I feel much more confident in that aspect of my ability to deliver medical help. Go ahead.
With me, Tim, I feel like I've learned how to pack and repack, whether it be for military stuff, whether it be for hiking or camp, right, depending on what kind of camping you're going to do, going out in canoes. And I've always kind of carried a basic and generic first aid kit. And, I went through EMT in the early 2000s. I have a decent amount of medical training, and I thought I had put together a kit that was adequate. And I'm 44 years old. I've been doing a lot of this for a minute, just like you have. And I tell you what, after this course, my first aid kit is 70% different. I mean, I got rid of so much stuff, brought in just a couple other things that, you don't think about, and you really start thinking more about like, okay, well, what are the actual medical injuries that I'm going to see while I'm out there, right? Like what makes sense? Probably if I'm out on the Allagash, no one's getting shot, right? So I don't need to bring like stuff that's specific to that, right? I need to bring stuff for, just like you said, most of the stuff we see is they're going to cut themselves, usually their hands, a digit. We've been, at least since I've been there, been lucky enough that no one's put an axe in their leg too deep, right? So,
But lots of knives.
yeah. Well,
Keyword too deep there.
so it seems like as long as you're thinking your kid out and you're taking your time with it, right? Even taking a course like this, you'll still change something, right? And that's what I love about being around Rick is you'll watch Rick and you see the way his setup is, what he's prepared for to deal with quickly, right? It's kind of like, how do you pack? What goes at the top, what goes at the bottom? And I watch that with Rick, and then you kind of realize, okay, well, that's based off of, what he's seen and what are the most common injuries and how fast he can get to them. So I just really enjoyed that part of the course, and I really got a lot out of that as far as how to repack, especially as, oftentimes the instructor or the guide out there, you're not thinking about just care for yourself. You got to be thinking about your students or your customers.
Yeah, my personal medical kit after the course, like I got rid of a lot of the gauze, a lot of the, the things that take up a lot of space, and replaced it with cigarettes and more leeches.
And that cranial drill to relieve pressure.
Exactly. And a couple little vials of, unnamed substances that they were blessed by a hobo.
It gets bad when the absinthe get broken. Well, we're just going to give them a bunch of that.
And I'm going to get a St. Bernard who always has a big wooden cask of brandy around his neck to follow me around.
Yeah, those were some good points that I haven't even really thought about. Like to yours, Oz, I didn't even really think about, rotating leadership positions. Like I did that on the fly because I noticed exactly what you were talking about, that the people with the skills like you and the folks that were in the long course were kind of taking the lead, and just by nature of competency, so that's when I pulled the old Ranger School trick and was like, okay, you're dead, you're in charge now, let's see what you can do. So I didn't really think about that aspect, but I guess that was a pretty good choice on putting the people on the spot and getting them to, bring out those skills that hopefully we taught them throughout the week. So appreciate
Yeah, I
it.
mean, how many times did you go to school and you're a ranger, right? And you just think, I'm just going to be the gray man, right? I don't want to stick out. I don't want, right? I'm not going to volunteer for anything, but I'm also not going to be like the worst dude. I just don't want to be seen.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a young student perspective, right? And as instructors, it's important that we find those people who just want to be the gray man,
Yeah.
or just want to kind of sit back and go, hey, no, let's draw that person out. Let's put that person in that zone of being uncomfortable, and let's see how they do, because I think that's where the real learning, right? Like it's easy to write it down on paper that, hey, this is it's 15-1 or 30-2 or whatever it is, and you can remember that on paper, or you can remember how to stop the bleeding. But when you actually have the dummy's out there and a wound is squirting, and you're actually having to pack it with gauze, you're actually having to put pressure on a wound, you're actually having to do CPR on a dummy, and like there's an instructor there, and you can't like look at some guidebook to give you answers, right? That is where mastery starts to come in, right? These things should be kind of second nature with first aid, because oftentimes we don't have a lot of time, and in a remote environment. The last thing you want to do is freeze. So that's what I really love about scenario-based training, right? It's just it really brings out whether or not you have that knowledge base, and whether or not, right, under a little bit of pressure, you can do well.
I thought the time of year seemed to work really well for us. November, it was cold a few of the nights. It was like 10 degrees Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
which, I think that makes it real. If it's the summertime and all you're doing is swatting bugs and sweating, you don't think so much about your gear choices as long as your flesh is covered up from the hordes of winged insects. But as it starts to cool off like that, I think it's important to realize, like, yeah, these decisions that I'm going to make about what I'm wearing, about my kit, they're going to matter. And especially when, for those of you listening to this, we did a week plus a little bit of training, and then we had a 24-hour scenario exercise where we had to locate injured individual, evacuate them, and then keep them warm and alive, checking their vital signs every few minutes for 24 hours. So it was a full night, no kit in the woods, and those things, if you had worn like a cotton t-shirt or something, it snowed that night. It was legit like, this is hard. And all those, like you guys mentioned, all of the woodsmanship components came into play. So I think from the perspective of designing a good scenario, like, we couldn't have asked for more weather-wise.
Yeah. I already have a small list of notes that came out of that course of even small little things. Obviously, we'll talk about it to add to the canoe semester, the long-term semester, right? Just more thinking about being prepared in case of a scenario like that, where we always tell them, always be a stick bundle ahead, but we just kind of say it. And I think this really drove it home to me that, like, oh man, if we would have gotten stuck in the scenario, because it rained that day, then it snowed, right? And we're trying to cut wood, if we wouldn't have had those stick bundles ready, if we wouldn't have thought about it prior to, it would have been very difficult, right? And now you're dealing with a patient, and Rick's also, right, during that 24 hours, Rick's throwing in all these little things on us, like, oh, now the patient's doing this, or, oh, look, you have an abscess, or, oh, look, so if you're dealing with, I can't start a fire, I'm struggling with the basic woodsman stuff, you're gonna struggle with the first aid stuff too as well. So, right, just thinking ahead was super important, and it really struck me how even myself, I'll go into a scenario and just be like, yeah, I can handle it, if something comes up, I got it, right? But, like, I don't want to put myself in that position. I want to be able to walk to my kit and get exactly what I need, exactly when I want it, and be able to do exactly what I want to do in the woods when I want to do it, right? Whether that be fire or first aid or whatever it is, right? So, really thinking ahead, and not just because of your own needs, but because of the needs of others, right? I think that was a huge lesson for me, which you'd think I would have gotten that by now, but,
Yeah, sometimes it takes us a while. I think about how many years I've been involved in this, and then, when I learn new things, I'm like, really? It took you 25 years to figure that out? Like, you gotta be the slowest.
Well, there's a reason I'm not teaching at any university.
Just a kind of a quick follow-up on this. We had a blog post where we announced it, but we had such a good time running the medical course that we're going to add a couple of other medical courses to the schedule for 2025. We're going to add a 2-day wilderness first aid course that will be part of both the spring and fall wilderness bushcraft semesters. And if there's a few open spots for those, they're going to be open to the public so they can come out for the weekend of the field school and, get those skills under their belt. And the big reason we wanted to do that is because we're training people to be guides on those long courses. And in order to test to become a registered Maine Guide, you've got to have a basic first aid and CPR course. And in the past, we've had people go looking for those off campus. So try to find one maybe at the hospital in Presque Isle. And it's always been a bit of a pain. And we didn't have anybody with Rick's knowledge and ability to teach those courses. So now that we do, we're going to leverage that like crazy. So if you're coming out to the semester course next year, expect to have that. And if you're in northern Maine, I don't know that there's any other sort of wilderness medical training in northern Maine, and I don't know about northern New Brunswick, but none that I'm aware of. So we might be the only show in town or in that whole region. I think you'd have to go all the way south to like Freeport maybe and get one from LL Bean or somewhere down by Portland. So 4.5, 5 hours away, not an insignificant amount to travel. So we've got those coming up in 2025. Other current events, we've still got our winter courses coming up in February. We've got the Winter Woodsman on the week of February 2nd to February 8th, and then the Boreal Winter Survival Instructor course from the 9th to the 21st of February. And before we hit the record button, the weather's been all over the place, as seems to be par for the course these days. So you get some bitter cold weather, then it warms up. You get some snow, then it rains. So, we'll see. Definitely going to be challenging conditions, I think. So prepare for the worst, hope for the best with all those things.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else. What do you guys have? Any big Christmas holiday plans or anything like that?
No, I'm pretty much taking the month and kind of taking it easy. I got a new puppy that I've been spending time with and training, so he's sucking up a lot of my time.
Oh, that's great. What kind of pup?
He's a Australian Cobber dog.
I have no idea what that means. What is a Cobber dog?
It's a new breed. It's actually along the lines of a Labradoodle, but
nice.
Yeah, super good dog.
I know Cooper's jealous. I know it.
She is.
My Christmas plans are low key, just staying here at home, and I'm out doing last second stuff because I always put things off, and so I'm out doing last second stuff today, and nothing much. Just happy to be home with family.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on a plane and go to Florida and see my mom. Bring the kids down, see my mom for a week. So she's real excited about that.
Awesome.
So staying with family over the holidays. Just expect that none of your pants will fit in 5 days because you're just gonna probably sit around and eat. But other than that, it's going so far. The off season's going great.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I wish I had some of that sun you have, Tim, because I tell you, a full Colombian man in the wintertime. All of a sudden, I need full sun and heat.
Yeah, I'm excited too. We got my friend Phil Salonik and I have dates on the calendar to run the Pecos River in South Texas in March. So excited about that. Last year, we're trying to do the big 3 of remote Texas rivers. Last year was the lower canyons of the Rio Grande, 85-mile trip. This year, the Pecos River, and maybe next year, the Devil's River. So those 3, there's lots of canoeable water down here. There's still a bit of a drought, but those 3 rivers seem to be the biggest canoe camping.
Are you going to start the Pecos in New Mexico, or are you going to...
No, the very lower section as it grows into the Amistad Reservoir. So I think it's Pandale to Comstock, but right where it goes into the big Rio Grande flowage. It's about 60 miles. I don't know that there's enough water upstream to canoe, so it's way down near the bottom. But got the guidebooks, got all that stuff, and Phil works for the state park system of Texas, so he has all these connections and contacts of guys who can do shuttles and things like that. So we're getting excited. I lugged a canoe all the way down here, so I better use the thing. Well, I don't have a whole lot else, gentlemen. Great speaking with you. Glad we could catch up and have a nice discussion about the Maine Guide Medic course. Yeah. Again, this is new. This whole record a podcast over the internet via software is all brand new to me. So we could hit the end record button and I screwed something up and I've got nothing to show for our half hour of discussion. So I guess I'll know that in a few minutes, but hopefully they made it idiot resistant, but we'll know soon enough.
Well, let's do this again soon.
Yeah, definitely. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for catching up, and talk to you soon. You have been listening to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. For more information on our professional wilderness guide training programs that are college accredited and GI Bill approved, visit us on the web at jackmtn.com.